Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Ripple Effect. Me, James, and this week's co-host. Let's do that.
Sure.
Luke Moore from The Football Ramble. So we're going to talk about identity, but also sort of like the price of change in terms of making a managerial change. Because Dyche is back, guys. Dyche Ball is back. And it kind of got me thinking about Nottingham Forest and how they went from one identity to another identity, and then they've kind of swung back in the other direction. And yeah, this will be a kind of meta discussion with Luke, which is why I brought him in.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, modern man.
I don't even know what a meta discussion is.
It basically means having a conversation with someone, or at least where at least one of you's got a moustache.
In which case I'm
so we're
permanently
fine,
a part of a meta discussion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So identity is the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. Okay.
I mean, I feel fairly comfortable knowing what the word identity means.
Well, see, I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
But I always like to go to the definition because I always find it kind of interesting, those things. I asked you guys on Twitter like what you thought of it. Here's one from like Jack Roberts. I then asked you guys what is the identity of your club, and we're going to kind of run through this whole big conversation of that, and then because maybe some examples of club's identity, and is it utter nonsense, and then also the kind of the price of making a change, which Nottingham Forest have done a lot of. So this is one from Jack Roberts. This is supposedly his definition of identity. A core group of values that no matter who comes in and who goes, those values are sustained, whether that's just based off winning or a deeper level of understanding of the community that the club is surrounded by. It has to be there. Does it have to be there? The word culture is used a lot as well. What are your general feelings of the word culture used in football? Identity, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think it is important to establish and maintain a culture. I think in organisations that want to achieve things, I think obviously it clearly makes sense that people understand what their objectives are, and then they can all pull in the same direction. And that's as close to Jake Humphrey as I'm ever going to sound.
That is nice. Yeah, can we clip that up and get that on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
I'm just the reason I wanted to talk about this is I'm suspicious of it. This whole thing of what we
I think you're right to be suspicious of it. I do. I think you're right to be suspicious of it because I am probably going to make myself quite unpopular on this show if we talk about this type of thing, because I think that football fans have a very romanticised idea of what the club they support represents, because it's impossible for them to be objective about it. And that is not a criticism of them. I think it's actually probably really important. They're not objective about it in lots of different ways. But it manifests itself in all sorts of unhelpful ways as well. So if a player that plays for your club does something appalling, outside of football, for example, I don't need to give you examples. There are loads. You can kind of tell a lot about the fan base by how they react to it, right? Right. And it's not me digging at any particular fan base at all, because every club's going to have this element. But when it comes to supporting the club, you're almost being asked from the very get-go to not be objective because you've been asked to support your club, right? Yeah. So you're going to fight for a refereeing decision. You're going to lord it up when you win. You're going to blame something else when you lose. That's the role of a fan. So it's very difficult for football fans to, I think, turn it back on themselves and say, what does our club represent? And because a lot of the time they'll say, we support Liverpool, therefore no one ever walks alone. Or we are West Ham fans, we play the West Ham way. Yeah. But both those things are nonsense.
They're
agree. Nonsense. There's no one of my age or younger that's seen West Ham play the West Ham way. Yeah, there's no... Sorry to rant on this, but I just want to finish this point on Liverpool. Did Roy Hodgson walk alone? But did he? Did Trent Alexander-Arnold walk alone?
I think he was rushed out. They were just in front of him, and they had sort of like pitchforks or something like that.
No, I have a huge admiration and respect for Liverpool as a club. But I think they're the biggest club in the country. They've done amazing things. Some of the most amazing moments in English football, as someone who hasn't got a dog in the fight at all, have come from Liverpool. And I'm super grateful to be a football fan until I watched that 2005 Champions League final, right? Yeah. But the idea of an identity of Liverpudlian fans, or Liverpool fans, want to cast the whole city in a bad light, is something that they have decided that they are all about, which I don't think is always the case. And it's not just Liverpool; it's loads of different teams.
Yeah, my feeling around it is, and actually West Ham has kind of probably planted the seed in it as well. I had Nicky on the pod a couple of weeks ago, and I was trying to sort of pin him down on what is West Ham's kind of identity? And it's probably, like you say, it's an unfair question because the truth is the identity that you want for your club is ideally the best version of yourselves. It's actually an aspirational thing. Like, because I think there's style of play which you can kind of allow for. That's the other thing. I think it's part of your identity is what you will allow. So like for some teams, they would allow for a bit more of a kind of, like, to put it into QPR's idea, we sort of, it's based on your history too. So you had Rodney Marsh and Stan Bowles, and we had those sort of maverick 10s, but we were also probably, we're a middling football club, right? Mm-hmm. We're not a huge football club. So you then end up needing a guy who's a little bit too good, and you then give him the shirt and you just laud him and love him. And sometimes that
so
player
like
often Eze and
Tarat
and all those guys.
Those kind of players.
So it both, what happens in your history then kind of, I guess, probably gives you a blueprint to facilitate the decisions that you will allow as a fan base as time moves on.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I think to go back to what I was saying earlier, there's definitely a decent argument to say that, if West Ham have lost their identity of being the crucible of the players that won the World Cup for England and playing football in a certain way and bringing players through the academy in this kind of Tony Carr era, like, if they've lost that, which I think they have, it's far more to do with the current ownership structure of football clubs and the people who are not taking their role seriously as custodians than it is the fans' fault themselves. I'm not trying to blame the fans. I've already said that I think the fans they have a role to play and they play it well. I mean, Liverpool fans play it brilliantly, right? But ultimately, a lot of the time, these football clubs and their identity is the sacrifice that's made for the way modern football works.
Yeah. And I, as I was reading through the running order for this, I did think to myself, this is a very provocative topic, actually. And especially if you, like, I could talk about QPR's identity, but when you start talking about other people's, that becomes quite a personal thing. So which makes it interesting. So, going into all of this, we're not looking to offend anyone. We're just you're going to naturally give your opinion, and if it is pissing you off, turn it off. But that's not the intent, right? But I think it's such a personal word, this idea of identity.
Yeah, and I agree, and it will mean a million different things to a million different people. But if you take the Forest example, so he's a very successful guy, he's got loads of money. Yeah, you can read up about him. I'm not going to libel anyone or say something I shouldn't. But ultimately, he's quite a tempestuous character. We can agree on that, right?
That's fair.
Now, going back to that custodian point, if he was taking his idea as a custodian of a club like Forest, historic, amazing, massive club, if he was taking that role seriously, he doesn't get in a row with Nuno or Edu in the year that Forest are back in European football for the first time in however many years, as a club whose whole identity is built on Brian Clough's success in the European Cup with them at the end of the 70s, right?
Yeah.
But he doesn't think like that.
But again, identity is the best version of Forest there.
Yeah.
That's the best version of
Forest. But you have to, what I'm saying is the owner should pay respect to that.
Yeah, I agree. And going to what we were talking about last pod about Twitter and how they should be behaving, there is, like you say, there's that ambassadorial element that kind of what you want the owner to be looking kind of at the long term and not just kind of having that short-termism, which it feels like has occurred here, both in the style of play of the managers that you've gone for, but also, like you say, the context of a season where Forest have stepped into this season with probably an understanding. I reckon if you're a Forest fan, you go, the league will be the league, but let's really have an adventure here. That's the rest of it we can live with. Let's not spoil it. So let's not ruffle. Can we just not ruffle? And it's just been wall-to-wall ruffle.
And it's been ruffles all over the place.
The ruffle effect. Shocking.
I think that a lot of people are assuming as well that Sean Dyche, because he's Sean Dyche and because he's going to bring in Ian Wone and Steve Stone and because he understands the club, as those cliches go, it's all going to be fine. If it isn't fine, it's going to go down as one of the most incredible acts of self-harm by an owner that we can think of.
Yeah.
Because they were, when things were broadly fine. They were better than fine.
Yeah, they were wicked.
He wanted to bring Edu in. That went wrong. With someone like Marinakis, it feels like when things take a certain turn, there's never really an off ramp. It just the temperature just goes up and up and up until the inevitable happens. But that's why you knew probably 4 or 5 games into Postecoglou's reign. That's it. There's no realistic way it's going to change.
Yeah.
And so that I would just argue, without being too bombastic, I would just argue that kind of ownership. Why I understand it, the way we've got football now, maybe it has to happen. The only feasible way to be successful in any way, shape or form as a football club now is to have a really wealthy owner. I think this generation of football club owners, whether they mean to or not, at their worst, shit all over identity because it's not important to them. It's not important to them. You could even say Abramovich at Chelsea, he ushers in this amazing era of success at Chelsea to the point where you argued in these notes here that their identity is winning trophies right now because of Abramovich, right? But in a way, it did at the time ruin their identity because Chelsea weren't that club until then. No. Chelsea were a kind of playboy, kind of quite small club, really, who didn't have any real sustained history in winning anything. But of course, no one complained about it because what came along was much better. But it was different to what came before, which is basically at the heart of what identity is.
I think in the running we've gone with that identity idea of Chelsea it being trophies is to disagree with it. So like I agree that it can't just be that. That doesn't. An object isn't an identity.
No,
like that doesn't make sense to me.
No,
like when I think of, so like when I put it out on Twitter, put your name, your club, and then put an identity there. So QPR, I've had a few of this. It was shit but local.
Okay,
all right. Whereas, and I think where you are in the world can play a part in that. I think Chelsea's an interesting one because as someone who's kind of seen average Chelsea, been around and like had that understanding of your friends like all being like Chelsea being goodish, I guess, and then them going into this different like kind of planet. There's a few. This is what I mean. There's a few identities at play here because there's one identity here. When you think of like Chelsea and QPR, people will laugh at this. But for a long time, we're kind of swimming in similar waters.
100%.
But
I think that's undeniable, isn't it?
Yeah, but younger people won't get it. Yeah,
70s,
70s, 80s. Well, we'd beat them in the 80s,
possibly even to the 90s.
Thank you very much. But the difference was Chelsea. There was always a bit more of a glamour to them.
Yeah,
and that's because of that, of where Chelsea is situated as opposed to where kind of QPR is situated in that, and where we would be a bit more self-deprecating with all of that.
So you're right. Chelsea hiring Gianluca Vialli and Ruud Gullit is far more identifiable to their identity than Mourinho is.
Yeah,
but Mourinho's more successful.
Yeah,
and I think you're right to point out clearly trophies aren't an identity.
Well, just generally Italians. Chelsea, like there's part of we were discussing, like managerial changes and the identity change that can come from that, and the sort of the price of change. We were sort of touching on, Daniel Levy going, we need to win, let's go get a winner, like Mourinho and Conte.
That's a really good example.
And with Chelsea, we were talking about Connor, who helps us with the running orders. He was saying he chucked out Sarri. I went, what do you mean Sarri? You love Italians. He was saying no. It was more actually the style of play thing, where he said that with Chelsea, as much as it was about kind of winning, it wasn't really about possession. And then when Sarri came in, and this is coming from a Chelsea fan, a younger Chelsea fan, it's interesting that he felt like that was clashing with the kind of identity of Chelsea as a whole. Whereas like on the face of it, for someone on the outside, there are elements there of it where like Chelsea loved that sort of that glamorous appointment of that Italian guy with a bit of like swagger. It's why I say Graham Potter for me at Chelsea. As soon as he goes through the door, I'm going, you're going to get eaten alive here.
Yeah.
Because you just need to have a certain swagger in my opinion, when it comes to Chelsea. But that's interesting. There's with Chelsea, there's that conflicting element of the Abramovich era, which it feels like coming back to the idea of like the best version of you being your identity. It's also kind of like what you'll allow for success, with Abramovich being able to create an identity of winning because that kind of suits what an identity I would like to have as a football club. Yeah, but I'm not sure that's the core of them.
Thinking about it, I don't know if that identity being the best version of yourself is accurate. I think the more accurate thing would be, and maybe this is an overly romantic view, would be that you should be at your most reflective of the community you represent. So, and you talked about the QPR fan there, shit but local, right? QPR are very much a club that's rooted right where they're rooted.
Yeah.
And, you walk through the terrace houses to get to Loftus Road. It's very closed in. And the stadium is a big part of their identity, I would argue. The team I support, Portsmouth, what's their identity? Really passionate fans, kind of working class northern city in the south.
Yeah.
It's quite tough.
Yeah.
Quite a hard place to come and get a result usually. There's been exceptions to that, obviously. There's been exceptions to that recently. But when Portsmouth win the FA Cup in 2008, that's an aberration. That doesn't become part of their identity.
Yeah.
No one's expecting them to go and defend that the next year. Or, I mean, they got to the final in 2010, but that was another kind of strange one. They got relegated that season too. There's a kind of almost glorious failure aspect to 90% of clubs. Right?
Yeah, I agree, and that's interesting because, like, with QPR, this is like, you stepped away from your identity when we spent all the money. But for you guys, you spent all the money and you got an FA Cup out of it, which is like result.
But I reckon if you went down to Portsmouth,
yeah, sorry, go on.
Well, to say if you went down, I mean, I have done this. I'm pretty sure it'd still be the case. If you go down to Portsmouth now and ask the fans about what they think of that Premier League era, they're clearly going to be delighted that the FA Cup was there, and they're going to be delighted that they got to see, Wayne Rooney play at Fratton Park and Thierry Henry or whatever. But they're going to have unquestionably tell you they felt much further away from the club than they do now.
Exactly the same for us.
And I think what the current ownership's done at Portsmouth has been very good at understanding that there's nothing wrong with a local club being local. So they've brought, Marlon Pack in, Connor Chaplin's come in, John Swift's come in. These are all local players, right? Yeah. They'll probably. I mean, I was surprised they didn't even go after Joel Ward, who's kind of from that kind of tradition. When he left Palace, like that's what you probably do lean into as an identity. But I'll just throw it back to you because you mentioned Levy there, right? Everyone knows that the Spurs identity, they tell themselves, is to dare is to do, play football in a certain way and all the rest of it. I'm not arguing, like when I said with Liverpool earlier, I'm not arguing that was the case. I'm not saying that it's built on a lie. It's not a fabrication. But what it has been done has been sacrificed on the altar of success over the years. And Levy's a great example of that.
Yeah.
If you look at Levy as a chairman, amazing off the pitch, amazing with the financials, pretty terrible in the football stuff, to the point where he's not able to not get involved and ruin things. If he had left in April 2019, when Spurs opened that stadium, he's a legend at Spurs.
Yeah.
Right? But what does he do? He arguably, possibly unintentionally, shits all over their identity by bringing in Mourinho, by bringing in Conte, because he's got himself so convinced that he spent so many years building Spurs up to a club that are big enough to be able to get a Mourinho, and he's put to one side the football, the shit on the stick football as it's called.
But going into that decision, it makes logical sense. We aren't winning. People want us to win. Go and get a winner.
Totally agree with that, but that's not the question you're posing to me. The question you're posing to me is about what the identity of a club is and how much it matters these days. And my answer is it doesn't matter at all now.
Yeah, right.
As much as we want it to, it doesn't, because Levy has decided there, by your own admission, and I agree with you, that the most important thing they have to do is get rid of the idea that they never win anything.
Yeah.
So who wants their identity to be, we never win anything? No,
of course. But I think we're getting somewhere here now, which is exciting. I feel like
unexpected.
I know. I did not see that coming. But that's the whole point of this, like the idea to like be able to explore it. Now, let's go down this road, right? So, what you're enjoying now, and I think some of the elements for QPR that we've been enjoying recently, and I think the best example of identity in a way, in a space that is sustainable identity, right? Is that if your identity is outward, that is very dangerous. Like if it's about trophies or it's about being Spursy, that is dangerous. I think Crystal Palace and the way that they have been able to build their own identity of where they are and what that represents is so exciting and powerful. And I don't think you could derail that.
I think you've just undone my argument.
I
think you just undone my argument because that's such a good example and not one I considered, even though they're my local team.
Right.
It's spot on. So Crystal Palace, I feel like do have a really strong identity and they understand it and the ownership is sympathetic to it and encouraging of it.
But
I think I still do think it's rare, but I think that's a really good example.
But I think, are there certain places where that can work, and is there a ceiling to that? Right, that's the next thing I was thinking about. Was that, so say with what Palace have been able to do right now, there are some principles that they can, both the fans and the club can kind of stick by, which is like, the focus on academy, the focus on and I think the thing that's very helpful for Palace as well is that South London is such a fruitful place when it comes to creating wonderful footballers. But totally. So they can kind of go to that well a little bit. But and then I guess there's a whole host of sort of connotations that in terms of how you want to be. But that just does lead to an ability for the fans who are part of that community and the players who are probably part of that community or can see what it is or can buy into it to then kind of come together. The thing that's interesting here, and it'd be interesting to see what Palace could achieve, right?
Yeah.
Is if you've got that all in place. One thing that I remember seeing there's a video by Asheville Concrete. I can't remember they're a company that sponsored QPR, right? Mm-hmm. And they had this video, this guy who's got a really great YouTube channel, and he was talking about why we sponsor QPR. And the reason he said he sponsored QPR is that they are sort of a national company, right? But he said, and it's good money because it's a good investment because on a UK level, you're able to get across your message to people, right? He said that if QPR got into the Premier League, we wouldn't sponsor them,
right?
Because it would cost too much. Because the Premier League is global. It's about being global there.
So there's no value in it.
So there's not the same value in it for him because he's trying to sell concrete. There's no point trying to sell concrete to anyone outside of the UK,
in China or the US or whatever. Yeah.
So I wonder, and I've got a possible, what's the word? Opposite idea to this, but let's carry on it. If Palace get to a certain point, is there a ceiling where that sort of local identity can't get you to the global level that you need to go and win a league, to then get in the Champions League, to then do all those things?
But you
start to look outward and global, do you then lose that identity?
I think you do, and that's why I said, do you need that though? Because I think the more success you have, I suppose, the less identity you're able to be afforded.
Yeah,
because you have to go and it's almost like the Athletic Bilbao thing about the Basque players and stuff. They've obviously fought really hard to protect that, and it's unquestionably, limited.
Yeah.
Them, in a way that they're presumably okay with. Now, I'm not saying in a different world they could win multiple championships. I don't know enough about Spanish football, but it seems to me that in a global game, if you're limiting yourself in that way, you're sacrificing something. But they have adjusted and adapted slightly in the modern era because they do bend the rules a bit.
There's a bit of bending going on, yeah.
Yeah, and so they clearly understand that trade-off. With Crystal Palace, I totally agree with most of what you said there. The only thing I'll take issue with is possibly the idea that South London is such a hotbed of talent, which of course it is, but we live in like an EPP world now, where actually, if there's the next best thing coming out of South London, playing in the cages in Brixton or West Nord or whatever, they're not automatically going to be Crystal Palace players because there's nothing to protect them. Yeah. And if the scouting is good enough and the temptation is there, that kid could go to City, and often does,
especially in London, and
could go to Chelsea and could go to wherever. I
think it's like an hour and a half radius, isn't it, or something?
It used to be, point. But it's not now.
Oh right,
it's not anymore, which makes it much more accessible for young players to go all over the place. And I think so that does contribute to an erosion of identity. But I think Crystal Palace definitely take it really seriously.
Yeah,
and that's great.
And I went. I've said this a few times, but I went to that FA Cup final, and I've been very patient with QPR. But it was the first time where I was like, "Fucking sort yourselves out now." Like you can see, like I want that day. Like hurry up! Like we've been here 10 years now. I need something. You need to give me something here.
Yeah.
And
what did they say? Just ignore you.
No one's listening. No, we're you up. Don't. I whisper it.
Lost at home.
We're looking better. Yeah. We're looking better. But I would settle for that really real understanding of like West London is ours and investing in that, because that at the level we're at, that works. Moving on to, because there'll be like Arsenal fans, Man United fans, all those top teams like screaming right now. I think it's interesting to talk about like because it feels like we're finding there's different avenues to identity that can work for you. But once you get to that global point, like I think I had Clive here, who's on Arsenal Vision podcast sometimes on other places. Well, he's amazing, and he was saying how they kind of Arsenal in the last few years, and it's kind of married with a successful team, which obviously helps. But like that, the North London, whatever the song is.
Yeah,
the song that they've got, their commitment they're trying to commit to their community a little bit and own their piece of London. I think like these clubs obviously do have their own identity.
I think that's
that
been
fans
broadly
need to be able to connect with.
I think that's another good example. I think that's been broadly successful as well. I think you're making me less cynical by the minute.
Nice.
I think Arsenal have also lent into this kind of lifestyle type thing as well, right? It's about being seen to be an Arsenal fan. They're trying to make it cool to be an Arsenal fan, the same way it's cool to be a Crystal Palace fan, right?
Yeah.
Crystal Palace are probably the coolest club around, right?
Yeah.
Arsenal are trying to replicate that in a way. So I think that's a really good example as well. I'll chuck another one. The West Ham thing's interesting, right? Because you've got a situation there where I know David Gold's no longer with us, but David Sullivan and David Gold buy West Ham as West Ham fans. I don't want to kind of put words in their mouth or paraphrase or whatever, but ultimately the general feeling was you've got some West Ham fans running the club now, right? So forget all that Icelandic nonsense, forget all that bankruptcy
Safe
thing.
with us.
Yeah. And then one of the first things they do is move them away from the Boleyn, right? And they not only move them away from the Boleyn, but, Karen Brady's coming out with all sorts of stuff, which doesn't turn out to be true, about how close the fans are going to be to the pitch, about how it doesn't actually have to matter that it's not a purpose-built stadium and all the rest of it. And they've clearly taken a decision there that the idea of strengthening themselves financially to be able to compete is more important than their identity. Now, it's undone slightly by the fact they won a European trophy, but I don't think it's undone that much by it, because I think the nature of the Europa Conference League when you're a Premier League team is kind of, it's kind of fish in a barrel, right?
Yeah, it's available.
So I think it's really interesting as a discussion, because you've got Palace, you've got Arsenal, who clearly do see the value in that, but then you've got other clubs who perhaps don't think it's that important. I think what unifies the whole thing is that all the fans do seem to think it's important.
Yeah, and I think you'll suspend any. It shows that it's just the power of winning or losing. But obviously, like Nottingham Forest, West Ham, Spurs, I think Everton, who have lost their identity and now kind of recovering it somewhat, in my opinion. But all those teams, I think what's interesting is that West Ham, in terms of you've made that move, right? Be successful now. It's that sort of that space of being kind of bigger than being just happy to kind of be knocking about, that plucky underdog thing, and then try and take that step to those global teams. That's where I think a lot of these teams get unstuck, because I think Forest from probably more of a short-term sort of situation, right, in the sense of, and again, the ownership obviously plays a part of that one. But Forest, great season. Now there's this, now what? There's this sort of like now what situation with Forest, West Ham and Spurs, where Spurs have got that stadium and then you're going, well, hang on a bit. We've been the also-rans, but we've kind of understood that for a while. But we should be over there now. West Ham, same kind of thing. Moyes has done all right, but we should be over there now.
But the
same thing's happened with Forest.
But the Moyes thing at West Ham was, as far as I understand it, was also that they didn't like the football that's being played.
Yeah.
They did, and so that does speak to the fact that they have this idea that they do want to play football in a certain way at West Ham, to the point where they're going to complain about it.
Carragher was talking about that yesterday, and he was saying, let's say Sean Dyche coming in, say he does all right, and they finish 9th.
Who, Nuno, you mean? At West Ham?
No, he's talking about Dyche at Forest.
Forest, okay, right.
Next season, it's going to be the same conversation, isn't it? Where you're going, he can get you from A to B, but he can't get you from B to C. And that was the same thing with Moyes. The
classic example of that, in my view, is Stoke City under Tony Pulis.
Yeah.
Where they, from nowhere, really, they become an established Premier League side. But slowly but surely over the years, it just grinds them down, the type of football they're playing. And Tony Pulis is playing this type of football that just keeps them in the league, and leans into the fact that Stoke the Britannia is very windy. And speaking of doing
short
long throws,
pitches,
there's long throws happening, right? And they're mixing it up, and it just becomes existentially very exhausting for the fans. They want to do something different.
Yeah.
And look, where are they now?
Yeah, and they made. And
I'm not blaming the fans for that. I'm just saying it's a kind of...
No, there was a like my best mate is a Stoke fan, and I remember at the time it was sort of, he was sort of like careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
And then Hughes came in, did well.
Yeah.
But it was one where, and you've seen that several times, where they've gone from that place to sort of from one extreme to gently moving it a little bit, so you still get all the best bits from that extreme, but because you're moving in the other direction, I think Roberto Martinez got it as well at Everton. You then find this sweet spot for a second, but then it sort of erodes at the end of it all because you start moving too far the other way, and then it starts to fall down.
But Hughes, I mean, Hughes from memory has also sown the seeds for them to be relegated out of the Premier League. He gets fired in January, and then who comes in?
I can't even remember now. Who did come in?
Paul Lambert, wasn't it?
Yeah. Really?
And then Paul Lambert comes in, and they eventually go.
And they've not been able to. So I think that like Stoke are doing quite well now, right? And do you know what, Stoke's, this is an amazing podcast. This is so much fun. So Stoke are a great example now. They've had loads of money and all right names in the Championship for years, and they kept going with these different managers where they were again didn't really get to where didn't really align with what's kind of Stoke were about. And when they bring in Mark Robins, you kind of go, yeah, I he's he's a solid northern but good and incredibly intelligent kind of manager, and they're in a much better place.
And you're within your
now.
rights to say, if he's done that at Coventry, he can do that for us.
Yeah,
I know it kind of fell a little bit short, but the point being that he delivered them back to where a good level, Coventry, right?
But Stoke fans don't want tippy tappy nonsense. They don't want it. They got sick of Pulis ball, I think, and that is understandable because there's a severity to that, right? But I always kind of put it to the analogy of like, if you're not eating a lot, if someone offers you a really like healthy but bland meal, it tastes incredible.
Yeah.
And when Stoke get into the Premier League, like they are like can't believe they're kind of here, and points are like bites of food, right? And so like if you get to whatever that food is, doesn't matter what kind of how flavoursome it is, like you're just delighted to be eating. But once you get to a certain point where you're satiated, like if you're going to want to eat now because you're not as hungry, you want something that's a bit more.
Yeah, I get the analogy. It's very clever.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think it works.
But Stoke fans were generally of the understanding that like it can be pragmatic if you need it to be. And actually, what's fascinating is that with Stoke and Robins, actually they play good stuff. Like they pass the ball quite well, but it's getting.
Is there to be cheeky about this and perhaps just throw it out there, being controversial for its own sake? A lot of clubs aren't Premier League clubs though. They're not top flight clubs in terms of size, and I think that Stoke aren't a top flight club. The team I support, Portsmouth, aren't a top flight club. QPR aren't a top flight club.
Do you know what? So someone said this.
So is it because we've got expectations that are unrealistic?
I think that's why I come back to the best version of yourself. Like,
right.
It's identity is probably an aspirational thing that I think at its best is probably reflective of things that, regardless of winning or losing, you can identify with. So I got by Liverpool fans. I won't name him, but someone laughed at me because our CEO said something. And I thought that's about right, and he was saying that we should be. Oh no, it might even been a Norwich City's. Was it Webber? He was suggesting that Norwich are a top 30 club.
Right.
What that means is that okay, you might be in the Premier League, but you might be 9th in the Championship.
Yeah.
But you're generally a top 30 club.
Okay.
And I think like I would take that right. That now we kind of keep you on after you were with Portsmouth, but I think there's a lot of top 30 clubs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah,
I get that.
So I think but again, it's about generations as well at times, right? Like to the West Ham point of view, that you got the younger fans with QPR. We've got maybe our older guys who are kind of going, look, we were a Premier League team for a very long. I remember that a little bit. And then you've got someone like we've got the younger fans who are going, look, we're a Championship team. It's going to take time. We've got to be super clever to do all these things. There's throughout this podcast. I think what I'm starting to get to is that there are so many avenues and contradictions to this buzzword that people are talking about and hanging their hats on a lot.
It means different things to different people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you know, I guess I'm not really saying that. I don't want to row back too much because I can't believe what I said, but you have to be pretty strong-minded as someone who's a decision maker at a big club to say, we're not going to do that thing that might improve us because it doesn't fit into our identity. I think far often, more often than not, the quest to go and win something at all costs is what wins out.
Yeah.
This winning culture is actually far more impactful, partly because of the whole world is a lot more homogenized now. Like there's a far less local identity in the world generally, right? And also because the Premier League is this commercial behemoth where how can you not target Chinese fans, American fans, African fans, and lose part of your local identity and not lose part of your identity? I mean, I think it's just the nature of, as ever with a lot of these things, football just reflects what society is.
And if you don't do that, that's to the detriment of your football club. Because essentially a pair of eyeballs, wherever they are, they're all as equal as each other in terms of, like, ideally the finances that you bring in that then allow you to go and do something. At the same time, I think if you're a fan in any country of the world, you still want to relate to something. So it's so complicated.
That's why I think that's at the crux of why moving domestic league games to other countries is wrong, because obviously Barcelona and Villarreal are going overseas to play a game, and there's a Serie A game happening in Australia as well coming up, and it's you can read about it. I don't go into the admin of it; it's quite boring. But the reason that is so wrong is actually because it completely breaks the implied and accepted mental contract of what a Serie A team is or a La Liga team is. If you are in a different country and you decide to support that team, you may go through amazing lengths to make sure you watch every game, and you may even visit the country at great expense to yourself, and that's to your credit if you're that passionate about it. But I would argue you don't have the right to demand they come to you.
Yeah.
And I think the moment that happens, if that is writ large across football generally, then the entirety of identity of football has been lost totally.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's quite, that feels then quite disposable. And I think, because I would imagine if you're, oh God, I don't want to step into a political hot potato here, but that sort of pilgrimage, that if you're a fan from around the world and the ability to get there, let me get to Anfield, and that I believe is my home, and then you can essentially get yourself to that. I have that with Loftus Road. There's just that doesn't change. I step into that place. That's where it all goes on. There's such power in that. Yeah, that you don't want to lose that. But again, is that a cultural thing? Because you see, the NFL, they're going all around the world.
I do think it's a cultural thing. I do think there is. I think it'd be a mistake to assume that the culture of fandom across different countries and different sports is the same. I just don't know enough about NFL.
I would love to know in the comments, guys. If you're a fan around the world, a Premier League game, not, if you're a Liverpool fan, let's say, a Liverpool home game being played in Australia, at an amazing stadium, but it's not Anfield.
This is nonsense.
But would it feel nonsense to them? I don't know.
I look, maybe I'm asking too much.
Yeah.
But if you're someone who's based in Australia and supports Liverpool, and you're the most passionate Liverpool fan going, I don't think you're any less of a fan. I don't think it makes you illegitimate as a fan.
Yeah.
I think you can be as passionate as anyone who was born, overlooking Stanley Park. Right? It's not about that. I think it's just about the idea that you need to understand that you don't get the right to demand they come to Australia to play a domestic Premier League game.
Yeah.
In a different stadium. That to me just seems like it tears at the fabric of what the sport is. And so if the people who are making decisions in the game, the administrators of the game, don't understand that, I mean, we really are lost. I mean, we are lost.
I've never thought about it. The sort of the connotations and the power of the word home, like a home game.
Yeah. Which is what hurts so much when West Ham moved from the Borough into the London Stadium, because it's not that they don't. I don't even think it's West Ham fans don't understand that things move on and things need to change. But I think they're within their rights to demand they're treated with a bit of care and a bit of respect and a bit of thought about how it's managed, and they deserve not to be lied to, and the reason they're lied to is because the people know what they're doing, and they're not going to get it through otherwise. And so I think,
and the only thing that's palatable in that is that, okay, right, this has got to go on. Well, at least win then. Like that's the one thing. But do you know what I mean? That's the one thing where you kind of go, the sort of, for want of a better phrase, that selling of the soul of Upton Park. Like, you know, West Ham were average for a very long time, but I think they could live with that because there was soul to it. If you're gonna sell the soul of it, you better, like, if we're doing that and we're not winning, I think that's what leads to, like, you know, a lot of anger, because it, like,
I didn't fully. I think I was sympathetic to their plight, but I didn't fully appreciate in a 3-dimensional way how angry they were until I went to a game, and it's basically just like watching a public event. Like, you might as well be going to the River Thames on New Year's Eve to watch the fireworks.
It's amazing how proximity is such a thing, like so important. That's why I love Loftus Road so much.
Yeah, you're so close. I mean, it's probably the best example of how close you can be.
Yeah, and I think that was like, if we were ever to move, it would be for, you know, it'd be for the possibility of, you know, success, right, which comes with money. But like, it would be
same with Everton at Goodison Park.
Yeah, I think what's interesting with them is that. Well, Kai, do you want to? Yeah. Kai, what do you think about that? You might need to come sit in here just so we can hear you for a second. Like the change, the movement there. What do you think of that? Will that mic work, Finn?
Yeah, that mic's running.
Come on, sit down. You might not be on screen, but
that's fine.
He's off screen for a sec. I feel Everton, I think, is quite unique in the sense of everyone's up for it. Is that because it was the drawing of it was sort of a new chapter?
Yeah, I think it's been made to work by other people's failings as well, because obviously you've got West Ham that it feels soulless. That the main thing about this new stadium is that it has soul, set the record for the decibels in the Premier League.
For most souls.
Most souls ever. Never sing that.
Yeah.
No, so I think as well, because West Ham moved to become better, Everton needed to move because it wasn't good enough for what we are as a club. And because we've been so poor these last few seasons, it doesn't...
It's a big thing, the proximity to the previous ground.
Yeah, I think you don't lose anything into... Liverpool's a small place. You can walk everywhere in Liverpool. Like when I lived there, it was great. You just walk everywhere. You live in the city centre. You actually see the same people all the time.
Yeah.
But Goodison Park was such a massive part of Everton. Like, loads and loads of players, even referees would say this is the toughest place to go. That they've made it a proper bear pit, right? And so the idea of losing that aspect of it is worrying for them.
That's it. And there was big concerns about the seating arrangements of who was going to sit where, because everybody, obviously Goodison Park, people have had season tickets for 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
The scary part was, you're not going to be sat next to who you've been sat for so long. It's going to feel different. It's going to feel alien to you. But from my friends who've got season tickets, they think it's okay. They can.
Do you think it's also interesting, like, if you're bracketing again, that you know, Forest, West Ham, Spurs, and we put Everton in this, because you went for it, failed, lost, you know, in terms of buying those players, like going away from what kind of Everton was, Dogs of War and all that, and what David Moyes had achieved with that team as well. You then spent the money, went, come on then, here we go, falls down. Everton are a team that are quite well positioned to go, yes, we are where we are, but we've been big, so we're not afraid to kind of attempt to make that jump, but we probably need to do it in a more soulful way, because we've seen how much of a mess it is when you just try and buy a load of 10s and it falls down. Is that a bit too romantic?
No, I think there's, for Everton fans, especially, I've been saying this and I agree with this, there's like a need amongst Everton fans and a belief that we are a big team, we're a big club, but it's like there's a chip on everyone's shoulder that we need to show them. And like getting Grealish and getting the new stadium done was that it felt like there's a bit of a weight lifted there in terms of it being able to show them. And then when Grealish starts to perform and the stadium works, it does feel like stress has been lifted. If it didn't work out if it didn't work out well in the first 5-6 games, it would have been
right.
The Everton fans are fickle. They turn. Like,
it's also your home, right? It's been built with you in mind.
Yeah,
it's like the different Spurs are the same. Obviously, Spurs fans are hugely proud of their stadium, and rightly so. It doesn't mean they don't have any affection for White Hart Lane, but it means it's been done with some thought and some care, I think. And I would say the same about Everton from what I've seen so far. You know, it's like if you move house, you move out the family home, right? You're being, in some cases, you're being asked to move out of a home where your child's taking his first steps and you've got a lot of memories built up in it. If you go into a nice new home that you've maybe had built or that you've chosen and you want to be there, it's very different to being chucked in some kind of house share or some place that's like not identifiable to you. And so that's why I think the Everton Spurs comparisons to West Ham don't stand up, because it's just there's examples of it being done well on one side and examples of it done with no care or thought whatsoever on the other side, which is, you know, dreadful given that, you know, in Everton's case the owners aren't even Everton fans, but in West Ham's case they claim to be, right?
Yeah, it's something to be said about the comfort blanket of still having Goodison Park as well.
Oh, of course, yeah, because you still
have it.
Right, we can still go back.
Yeah, we've got 3 stadiums in that city now. Weird.
So when you're in the Championship, you can walk past it
and go there before the game. Talk to it.
Last one on Everton, the sort of the Grealish exciting signings and like this just sort of new iteration, hopefully, of Everton. Do you think the fan base would be put their foot down, metaphorically, if you kind of started spending like you did before? Do you think people go like, hang on, we've seen how this plays out, don't do that? Because I think a lot of us, it is so intoxicating when you buy players, like you can fall for it.
Yeah, I think...
Do you think they'd be mature? Do you think any football fan could be that mature?
I think we like struggle with flashy things. So it has to be flashy but not
Grealish.
too... Yeah, it's a nice car, but it's not a crazy
It's
colour.
Grealish, but it's not James Rodriguez.
Yeah, I'd miss James.
You like James.
Yeah.
But we've got about a couple of minutes here. I did want to touch on some good stats here. So in terms of sort of making that change, because we were going to talk about Forest in a lot more detail, but we've had an amazing chat, so I'm absolutely fine with it. In terms of making that change, there is some... Well, I've lost it now. The data behind it is fascinating, because apparently there is a 20% kind of improvement on points gained weight. But the effect of that often disappears after a period of 5 games.
Yeah,
I'm always intrigued about like the sort of the turbo boost that comes with the changing of a manager. I also have a general theory that if you have 3 managers in a season, you will go down. Yeah, which I just think this Forest squad is a bit too good for that to occur. What do you think about Ange getting the job and then losing the job, and then Dyche now having the job?
It's incoherent, and I think the reasons that Ange Postecoglou was hired were the wrong reasons. And I think I don't read too much into the kind of idea that you change manager and you get a boost. Well, to me, the reasons for that seem pretty obvious, which are that, you know, players want to be picked, they want to play, they know it's a clean slate as soon as a new manager comes in. They try a lot. I'm not saying players don't try, because obviously they do, but they get out of that funk that they've been in, and it serves as a benefit to them, because they can go, right, from day one now I can write my own story again with this new manager, and it just gives everyone a boost, and it's not surprising that it wears off. I would say the example of that, which is I thought was really funny, wasn't picked up that much, was how often Morgan Gibbs-White was talking about how great Ange Postecoglou was, right? Oh, it'll always work. It'll click. It was definitely going to. We just got to get it going, and it'll be fine. Up to the point where I think like 15 minutes before he was sacked, Gibbs-White was saying it's not good enough from the players. The manager's been great, and all the rest of it.
Oh, right.
And so, but that to me is funny, because it says to me, you might as well just translate it to saying, please pick me. Oh, you benched me the other week. I want to play, and I don't think footballers can necessarily be that more complicated.
Did you get? I don't know if you heard of any Ryan Yates's like comments.
Yeah, that was a really interesting interview as well. Yeah.
That felt like maybe a bit of the opposite there, where he was sort of like, I don't know, or maybe again to the same point, it was like, I'm in a bit of a corner here, like I need to carry on.
I think he was frustrated because he's got an ambassadorial role as a captain and he's asked to answer these questions. And I think it was a dereliction of duty from Marinakis to not fire Postecoglou himself when he was at the game anyway. I mean, I understand if you're away on business or whatever and it has to be done, I get it. But he was at the game and he nipped off and left someone else to fire him, even though he hired him and gave a big statement about how he'd put Greece on the map and all this other stuff. So I thought that was a dereliction of duty. We had the last couple of days, we had to read the news that he was just deciding between Roberto Mancini and Sean Dyche. I mean, is that joined up thinking? No? Did he expect Postecoglou to start playing amazing football with the players he had that were completely at odds with his style? Yeah,
it could be that.
Could be.
Like, there's a whole idea about that of like, get that done. I think like if you had someone who played exactly the same football as Ange did, and also the other thing, sorry, with this data suggests it's interesting and kind of obvious, but the bottom half, teams in the bottom half of the table making a managerial change earn more points, whilst teams in the top half accumulate less points per game. I think that's actually more to do with the feeling around those clubs, because if you're in the top half of the division, you're probably doing okay, and so someone coming in, you'll kind of go a bit like Rooney and John Eustace. And I think the
data must be quite small for that though, because the only reason that managers leave when they're doing well is because they're going somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think if you kind of have the same sentiment with Nuno in the fact that they'd done so well and then he's gone, I think that kind of plays into this as well. But I do think the sort of the caricature of Ange was a huge problem here that I don't think Ange probably was really aware of. And I wonder if Ange comes into a job at the start of next season with a full pre-season, but forget the pre-season, but more so just a different sort of kind of grounding, but also an opportunity for everyone just to like chill out with the such a strong conversation that there was about him last year, and such a strange one in terms of like how bad they were in the league and better in the cup, and the difficulty with his demeanor in interviews and press conferences. I think it might have been a lot more different.
I'm pretty sympathetic to the idea that no one could have done a very good job in those circumstances at Forest, because I think the players just still wanted to play for Nuno, and I think they were probably just like, what?
Yeah.
What's going on? Like, why has this happened?
Yeah.
And I also think it's what's really indicative of the point you're making about Postecoglou and this caricature of him is that a week, or maybe even less than that, a few days before he's sacked from Forest, he's still answering questions about Spurs.
Yeah.
It's like I think in a way that's unfair on him, but in another way it's his own worst enemy, because he can't not lean into that. He can't not say, guys, I'm a Forest manager now. This is hugely disrespectful to an amazing club. But you're asking me about Tottenham. Tottenham have got a new manager. We're in a new season. This is my job.
Yeah.
I'll answer any questions you've got about my job here at Forest. But Spurs is done. No, I'll write a memoir in 10 years' time. Read it.
All about it.
Yeah, until then, I'm not answering any more questions about Spurs. But he can't, because he feels like he has to fight his corner all the time. Because I think that he thinks that because he's Australian and because he's had a less than traditional route into the top level of management, he has to justify himself all the time.
Yeah,
which is why he protests too much about, I always want a trophy, I always want a trophy. I mean, it got to the point where it was just ridiculous. I mean, you are not going to be in this job for 2 years. You cannot say, I always win a trophy. You cannot say, going into the Swansea game, when's my identity going to be put on this team? Wednesday night. And then lose to Swansea.
Yeah.
He couldn't resist this low-hanging fruit.
It's fascinating. After everything we've spoken about, it's the two things you think of, two sentences with him in terms of his identity, right? It's who we are, mate, right?
Yeah.
Which is far more kind of like, this is how we're going to do everything, and that scoreline in the corner doesn't matter. Something that he said himself in a chat with Rio Ferdinand. By the end of it, he became about, I always win a trophy.
Sure.
And that is not, that's such a dangerous, sustainable, external factor that you can't attribute your identity to. And he should have gone back to kind of the sort of that first season energy that
we should have linked them. What he should have said was, this is who we are, and the result of who we are is always this.
Is often this, yeah.
Rather than hiding behind the fact that you won the Europa League. And I just don't think he should have been talking about that 8 games into another job. Anyway, I mean, because he went on a big diatribe about how if you look at it one way, I was a failure at Spurs. If you look at it this way, I was a second. No one cares about Spurs.
Is it because he kind of knew he was already gone?
Yeah, he had nowhere left to turn.
Yeah. And again, interesting with everything we discussed here, like the back to the football pitch here. You've now got, because of that sort of what feels like incoherent thinking, you've got a squad there that when Ange literally steps in, and if you haven't got all that noise around him, with the Amari Hutchinsons and the squad that's kind of being built there, there's a lot of exciting elements to it, but it's still kind of on its way to an Ange squad. And
I think it's too different, James.
But I think there's a lot of elements that it could have worked. When I first looked at it, and then you look at it from that top line tactical side of it, there were a lot of like good, decent, fun players there, but there were 2 or 3 real problems. Like in terms of what Ange kind of wants to do.
How the defenders like to defend is a massive problem.
How defenders want to defend, and you got your talisman, the guy who's got you all your goals last year, who generally when Ange plays, he kind of has this sacrificial striker who does all that running, and Chris Wood just can't do that. So you're sort of in between, you're caught between two identities. But with Nuno, it's sort of stepped away from one already, but could you allow him to walk with them? And now you've gone from here to here, and now you've got Sean Dyche, who is probably
much more similar to Nuno.
He's further along, I would say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I am fascinated to see how it works out. One thing I feel pretty certain of is I can't see how it can improve on the ceiling that Nuno had.
No, I agree. I think,
so you've not really got anywhere, and it's been pretty costly.
That's why I said it's an act of self-harm.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you got till it's gone.
Yeah.
Can you not just get past an argument? Can you not just sit down and just bang your heads together and go, okay, right, you want this, I want this, it's my club. I respect you, though, for being a good manager. Can we get past this? Rather than let it escalate. Like I said, there's no off-ramp with him. And it's going to end up worse than it was before.
Because he's always in power, so you can just go chop next. Whereas instead of trying to work in,
it feels to me like he got a good manager by mistake.
Interesting.
Twice with Cooper as well.
Yeah. Luke, mate, it's been a joy, man.
Thanks for having
nice
me.
To chat to you. That's exactly. That's why I messaged you, mate. Because I was like, this was the conversation I wanted to have. I loved it. Is Kai on camera, by the way?
Yeah.
He is good. Because I just like if he's just been out of shot, and if you're Kai's accountant, can he pay for all these for his expenses now, all his clothes, right? Because give him a break.
Give him a break. Look bad.
Exactly.
God.
Right, guys. I loved it. I hope you did as well. If you did, please follow the podcast. Check out the previous podcast we did earlier in the week, or came out earlier in the week. Go check out the Football Rambles. A link to them in the description, where they have much more intelligent chats than this one. And this one I thought was pretty high end.
That's not true.
Have a wonderful week, and we'll speak soon.